I just want to just kind of lay out the first two chapters based on my highlights. And I did this specifically because I'm not giving you the whole book, but I am giving you more or less what I feel like are the quote unquote highlights. So the book that we are reviewing is Becoming Like God, Kabbalah and Our Ultimate Destiny by Michael Berg. As Chica mentioned, I did not hear about this book. I didn't know this book existed. To a nice young lady came onto my YouTube channel and said, "Well, I had this bright idea. Something came over me to upload my Kabbalah courses that I was doing earlier last year in the summer. I kicked off Alchemic Academic by really teaching on the Kabbalah, but then I kind of brought that into chakras, and then from chakras got into shadow work, from shadow work got into law of attraction, then got back to the first class where I was talking straight up DNA, straight up Kabbalah. And when I uploaded those old courses to my YouTube page, a young lady had commented and said, "This reminds me of this book called Becoming Like God, Kabbalah and Our Ultimate Destiny. You should do a book review on it." And I said, I hit her with a bullseye emoji, like, I will. And so once I got the book, I was actually feeling like, no, I wasn't feeling like shit. I was angry. And my son came downstairs and he was playing a game and he was hiding the book behind his back. And I was like, "Stop playing." And so he stopped playing. He gave me the book. And then I instantly started to feel a little bit better and started moving towards healing and started really repairing and doing a lot of soul work from reading the book and behind of all of the stuff that I was doing. So here we are. I read the book probably, I would say 2 times, but I'm going probably on my third time, but then I skim it and scam it. But this is I don't think it's like the best book ever, but it definitely was the book that I needed when I needed it at this particular time. And I hear a lot of stuff online. I hear a lot of people say what you should do versus what you shouldn't do. And to me, it sounds foolish after reading this book. To me, the only thing that we must do is move closer to becoming like God. And since it isn't being God, we are always perpetually without permanence, without becoming a statue, becoming like God. So the first analogy that comes in the book, when the book is like the first thing that the book talks about, and people have referenced in the chat already, the mountain and the rock. And reading this, it charged me. It revitalized me because I've heard Bobby Hemmett say, if you put a cup in the ocean, the contents of that cup are the same contents within that ocean. I've heard that before and I resonated with that. The mountain and the rock, just something it hit different for some reason. Whereas the understanding of the rock to be lifeless, without hope, without any type of support, has the same static electricity of a mountain, the same mineral energy, the same diamonds, the same ore, the same volcanic ash, the same energy of a mountain that rock has. He goes in to explain that the rock existence is determined not by its substance, but by its relation to the mountain that is its source. So, what is this saying at a human level is that humans are exactly the same essence as God. You might call that blasphemous. You might say that that is wrong, but in reference to your understanding, if you can't wrap your mind around this in chapter 1, it's going to be a hard time reading the rest of the book. And even deeper, we will forget, as we have stated in the opening chat, we will forget the fact that we have the same essence as God. Humans are like God. So, what blocks us from that? As it Kara said, our desire to receive for the self alone. Now, for a majority of people that I talk to when I'm doing readings or I'm doing counseling sessions or just saying hello to people at the grocery store, They only have the desire to receive for the self of alone. Some of our mamas and our daddies, our grandmas and our grandpappies have this simple desire to receive for the self and for the self alone. And this is known as the ego and the source of all of our pain and suffering. Pretty simple formula, pretty simple understanding to kick off the book. And so as I'm reading it and I'm processing it, it's clicking for me. Because I might get to a point where I'm like, man, I'm tired of doing videos. I'm tired of sharing on social media or that. But then it's like people will come in my DMs or people will come in my email and people will be like, thank you for your video that you did. Thank you. I was at a dark place and you don't know how much your videos helped me. My wife was just talking to a lady from the insurance, didn't even know that was my wife, was talking about how her mama died, her grandma died, and I was the only one that helped her through the transition of her mom and her grandma. She said she just listened to my videos when she go to sleep. It helped her somehow. So I'm not saying that to pat myself on the corner or on the back, because at the same time, I might be standing on the corner asking for change, because doing this work is not to say that you're going to be rich and famous, but it's also saying that I don't simply desire to receive for the self and the self alone. And even when I do, I have to move myself out of that. Overcoming the ego will reveal your true essence and become like God. And so essentially, that's the first chapter, really trying to connect your mind and your essence to God. Now, we're super conscious, we're super woke, so you might feel like you're already there. But I tell you, for people who don't listen to Bobby or Panic or, Dreamwise and things like that, they don't have the idea that they are chaos being or like God. They really feel like God is somewhere on a mountain living it up, and we down here struggling. But if you can conceptualize and meditate, and I'm telling you, just read in the first chapter, if you can meditate on the fact that you have the same essence of God, you can begin to progress and grow. Ultimately, if you think you're a weak, pain, suffering, ego human being trying to just get what you need to get out of life, then it's going to be difficult. So the second chapter is called A Crack in the Prison Door. And after this chapter, I'll be finished. He starts off by saying that one must realize that the desire to receive for the self alone is a prison. Essentially, this crack is understanding that God is within us. And ultimately, everything within that understanding deserves a technology associated with it. To explain that a little deeper from my perspective, to become like God would have some form of understanding attached with it, as opposed to just saying, okay, I'm just becoming like God. I'm gonna just randomly become like God. Like you could just randomly become an accountant. You can't randomly become a bus driver. You can't randomly become a teller at Kmart. So you're not randomly going to become like God as opposed to understanding Kabbalah. Now, at first, all spiritual technology is confusing. And as adults, your ability to want to learn would be your ability to understand Kabbalah. All I can say is be patient. Don't try to learn it all in one day, but just be patient as you try to understand it. Why? Because Kabbalah is not a religion, but rather a technology that predates religion, as was stated in the book. So understanding Kabbalah, understanding your inner technology, understanding your inner God, the God within you, ultimately, we have a prison guard. We have an opponent. And what is the opponent? The opponent is the negative force, the desire to receive for the self alone. He says this a lot in the book, and I've said this a lot within this presentation because essentially it's pervasive. Essentially, it is ubiquitous. Essentially, it's the part of you that says, what about me? Why haven't I got with everything that I've gotten? I should have more. And in that space, you are knee deep into the opponent. And it doesn't come dressed in the clothes of an enemy, it comes dressed in the clothes of a friend. So it's a positive energy within yourself, the opponent, although it being the ego, the part of you that says, what about me? And ultimately, what is the opponent? It is a subconscious program to oppose every effort that we make to change. So essentially, We may say, what is my problem when we're alone by ourselves? If we having a real conversation with ourselves, imagine all of the external shit, all of the money made. You're really trying to figure out what the fuck, right? It is a subconscious program within ourselves. And so if we can't tune in to the level of us being God, then ultimately we're essentially letting the opponent win. And it's very subtle. It's not going to hit you with a sledgehammer, it's going to rock you to sleep. What is this? Essentially, this book gets into some very deep territory, such as living forever, right? And in order to live forever, you would have to be opposite of getting old and dying and things of that nature. So essentially, one can get rather old and get to a point where you are just living life, thinking about yourself every single day, thinking that everything is fine. But at the end of the day, the opponent is winning because you're not in a space where you're able to share. Now, that's later in the other chapters, and he gets into more of the science of becoming God. I'm not going, one of the chapters I'll end on this is certainty. And certainty is how we can understand, like, if you become like God, you have to be certain in your ability to become like God. And sometimes, in reference to that understanding, like some people naturally can feel like they are supernatural beings, but for the most of us, we are following our parents, we're following society, and we don't actually know that we have a lot more power. But ultimately, we would have to have this conversation. Y'all would have to read the book, get into this conversation, because what are we essentially doing when we tap into this power? We are tapping into the science of making the unthinkable a reality. This is our supreme journey from prisoner to God. And I feel so excited about being on this journey with y'all that I would just hope that, y'all would read the book, take it seriously, and utilize it within y'all families, within y'all communities, and then within y'all everyday life. You know what I'm saying? Because for me, this is it. You know what I'm saying? This is a very powerful book, a very powerful share, and it's so powerful that I couldn't necessarily read it by myself. So, with that being said, are there any questions, comments, or concerns? And then ultimately, when would be a good day for us to talk about?